All right. Everybody's joining us. We're live on Facebook. Miss Amy, you can, everybody's being muted, but there you go. All righty. All right, everybody's in.
All right. Bear with me. And Rebecca, you're monitoring the chat, I assume.
Yes.
Wonderful. Good afternoon, everybody. It's so nice to see so many faces as I scroll through the screens to see everybody's faces here at the Women's Council Convention. And we're so honored to have Dr. O'Connor with us today. But before we get to Dr. O'Connor, is Holly Hurry on this Zoom call yet? Do we see her?
She is not on the call just yet.
Okay. So we're going to go a little out of order, but Holly Hurry, who is from Pillar to Post, that you all know is a state strategic partner. We're hoping that she's able to join and we'll give her a few minutes to share some information, and we can all give her lots of love for all of Pillar to Post support of our state and our local networks. Okay, so before I turn it over to Dr. O'Connor, and he has joined us at the beginning of the pandemic, and spoke to us, and we got such wonderful feedback that we wanted to invite him back. He's going to spend some time talking about the market report, really what's going on in the market, because all of our clients are asking us, can we sustain the growth that we're experiencing right now in the low inventory? So we've asked Dr. O'Connor to share his expertise, and then he's going to also talk about a tool on the Florida Realtors website, which is SunStats. Okay, so with everyone's permission, and I'm going to thank the team for coordinating today's session, I'm going to share with you who is about to speak and some of the information on Dr. O'Connor with your approval. Okay, Brad O'Connor, who's a PhD, is a chief economist for Florida Realtors, the state's largest trade association with over 195,000 members. As the head of the research department of Florida Realtors, he oversees the production of the association's widely cited monthly housing market statistics, as well as numerous other economic and statistical research projects. His commentary on Florida's real estate markets regularly appears in major daily newspapers around the state, and he has been featured in many national publications, including Bloomberg Businessweek, the Wall Street Journal, and the Washington Post. And if you all are like me, I look forward to his video every month about the market report, so I can learn information and then share it with our sphere and our clients. So with no further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Dr. O'Connor. Thank you for joining us once again.
Hey, thank you for having me. I'm going to share my slides here real quick. Yeah, thank you, Amy. It is good to be back with all of you. And yeah, it's been, what has it been, 3 or 4 months since we talked last, and a lot has happened since then. We've had a little bit of a market recovery going on. So what I was going to do today is kind of run through some of the basics of what's happening in the Florida housing market, and that'll give us some context for what I'll talk about afterward, which is SunStats, a new product from our team that we released in February, just in time for the pandemic. So we haven't been marketing it too hard because we've been too busy with tracking the pandemic. But it's a really useful tool, and it's actually still got a ways to go in further development. So I'm excited to show that to you. But let's start with all the good news we're seeing in the housing market. One of the statistics we track at Florida Realtors, and I should say myself and our economist Erica Plemons and former NAR Chief Economist John Tassilo were all hired in 2011 to build a system for Florida Realtors to create very accurate market statistics. This was after the downturn of the Great Recession, and there was a lot of mistrust towards realtors and anyone involved in the housing market, really. A lot that we had an NAR Chief Economist previously who might have been a little bit rosy about the housing market, way beyond when he should have been. So What a bunch of our members decided to do was create our own research department. We are the second state association to have one. California has had one for a while, and now we're the only other one until Virginia joined us last year. But our goal is basically to help Florida realtors be the voice for real estate in Florida and be accurate, comprehensive in terms of reporting statistics, and have a transparent relationship with the media in how we calculate these things. So they hired the three of us, and we built this. And then in 2015, at the end of the year, John stepped away, and I took over for him as chief economist. But these statistics are a labor of love for me and Erica and John too, and we've been doing them now since 2011. You know, the way we do them is to pull in MLS data from all of the MLSs in the state. That was a really big thing to get done, was to get everybody in the state to agree to send Florida realtors their data feed. You know, the MLS is your golden goose at the local level. So we had a lot of skeptical people we had to win over, but we were able to do it, and it's worked out great. And what local associations get back from us in return for this is that we create local area statistical reports as well as state level statistical reports, and we give those to your local associations free of charge. And of course, everything we produce is accessible by any member of Florida Realtors too. So you can usually, most of your local associations, some of the larger ones have had their own statistical reports for a long time and do them very well. Off the top of my head, Orlando and Northeast Florida do a great job at those, but a lot of the other associations use our reports. So, and we don't care which one, as long as we're able to get your data and get accurate statistics for the state level. So you can find our reports on many of your local association websites, and they're always on floridarealtors.org too. I'll walk you through that a little bit later. We track 13 metrics currently, and one of them is new pending sales. New pending sales being a count of how many homes went into pending status basically during the month, or contingent status for those MLSs that still have contingent status available. So we basically, if it goes, you know, flips over to that status, then we count it as a new pending sale, a potential new contract. Normally, we look more closely at closed sales. That's when the money changes hands and when everything's official. But new pending sales, obviously, as all of you know as realtors, these precede closed sales. So in times like this, when everything's moving so quickly, new pending sales are a key indicator to look at so we can see what's ahead. And I'm gonna not dwell too much on these numbers, but just looking at January and February, we had a great start to the year, double-digit growth, and I'm looking at year-over-year numbers here. So this is January compared to last January. That way, we don't have to worry about seasonal differences from month to month. So just comparing this January to last and this February to last, we're up over 10% in single family and up over, you know, close to 14% in condos and townhouses both months. But things really started to go downhill in March, especially in South Florida, where we had an initial outbreak. If you remember, we've had two outbreaks in Florida. This one that we're currently coming out of right now was statewide, but the first one was concentrated almost exclusively in South Florida early on, or right when, you know, we were having the problems in New York and New Orleans and Detroit and elsewhere. There were very few outbreaks throughout the U.S. at that time, but those were not small ones. But the current one has affected all of us. So down pretty big in March, got really bad in April, although I have to say the worst of it was in the first half of April. Then we started to recover. Actually, if we were looking at data on a weekly basis, we could see it recovering. And so we were cautiously optimistic at that point. And then in May, for single family, we actually ended up being up year over year for the number of contracts. And still way down for condos and townhouses. But, you know, you compare being down 17% to being down 57% like we were the month prior, and being down 17% is a great improvement. And then finally, the last 2 months we've produced data for, June and July. Holy cow! I mean, it's a huge recovery. Look at the number of contracts we're seeing for single family homes, and not far behind are condos and townhouses, which again were down 17% in May. So really strong recovery on both ends. And that puts us actually in positive territory in terms of the number of new contracts we've seen so far this year in single family homes. And we're not in too bad a shape with condos and townhouses being down only a little over 8%. If you're more of a visual person and you like to look at charts, this is a representation of a lot of that same data. I've got the last 4 years worth of new pending sales by month on here, so you can compare the same month year to year. In 2017, you'll notice over there on the right, we had a dip in September of 2017 because of Hurricane Irma, which affected the vast majority of the state, pretty badly. So that really had a dampening effect on new pending sales. But this was a much bigger effect, obviously, here in 2020. We had 2 straight months where we were well below where we normally are. So why are we resurgent right now? Well, there's a few reasons. Interest rates, interest rates being the big one. We are now at all-time lows, at least going back to 1972 when we started tracking the average national mortgage rate. There's only 2 other times we've even approached being as low as this, and they were both earlier in this same housing cycle, in the end of 2012 and towards the end of 2016. But we're actually well below those now if you actually look carefully. Not going to spend too much time on this chart, but interest rates tend to follow the 10-year Treasury bond rate, although the yield on a mortgage is higher because they are riskier assets to own if you own a mortgage loan, if you're an investor, simply because someone can obviously default on their mortgage, whereas it's considered nearly impossible to ever see the day that the U.S. government would default on a Treasury bond. So that's why the rates on mortgages are higher. And we've just noticed as of late that the spread between these two is actually larger than it usually is. Usually it's about 1 2/3 to maybe 2 percentage points different between the mortgage rate and the Treasury rate here. And right now it's bigger than that. So what that tells us is that there's actually a little bit of more room for this interest rate to fall. Not saying it will exactly, but there's room for it to do so. Why the low mortgage rate is important? Well, I mean, it's pretty obvious, but just to put a finer point on it, this top chart here shows single family homes and condos and townhouses. This is the median sale price each month going back to 2008. That's how far our data go back at Florida Realtors. Split by single family and condo. And whether you're looking at single family or you're looking at condos and townhouses, on a year-over-year basis, because there's seasonality in here, you can see those bumps each year in each data series. But on a year-over-year basis, we've been growing price-wise for over 100 months in Florida in either category, if you compare the median sale price each month to the same month last year. And that includes last year, 2019. We had pretty solid price growth. But if you look at what people are paying on a mortgage for the median priced home, and that's what I've graphed here at the bottom, I just assumed a 20% down payment. It doesn't actually matter what down payment you assume as long as it's consistent throughout the whole data series. But, just looking at the median sale price and the prevailing mortgage rate at that time, this is the estimated monthly mortgage payment you'd pay on a median priced home. And you'll notice in 2019, it actually fell for the first time in a while. And that trend continued on into 2020 as well. Same thing with condos. So because of that, it's actually, it's cheaper to get a home in a sense now than it was before if you're doing financing. So at least in terms of your monthly payment. So that's really opened it up to a lot of these folks, the millennials, who've been trying to find homes. We've been talking about them for so many years that before you know it, they've all grown up. The oldest millennials are 40 now. And the peak here where we've got, this rising wave here, they're all 30 or older. So our little millennials are growing up, and they are now parents in many cases. And that really changes your perspective on your home. I mean, and if it didn't, then now that you've been trapped in your home with them for several months, like I have, a little bit older than a millennial, but I still have kids, and yeah, I'm thinking about, maybe a change of scenery too. But don't send me your business cards yet. Got to talk it over with the wife. So we've got this huge wave of this huge generation that's starting to buy homes, and they're really looking for the more affordable end of the pricing spectrum, and they're looking for the classic single family home. That's really what's driving a lot of the demand. There's probably demand from people wanting to leave the city centers. Not so much in Florida. Perhaps it's happening in Miami, but we're not a very, our cities are not very densely populated. I think if you actually look at population density by zip code in Orlando, for instance, the highest population density isn't downtown. It's this zip code that's just north of the airport, I think. So, but Miami is a place where we've got a lot of congestion and things that people might want to, get out of the central city, but it's not as much of a issue elsewhere in Florida. Places like San Francisco and Manhattan, you're starting to see an exodus of people, but central cities elsewhere, not so much. That said, there's enough of those people that we're definitely hearing from them, and they're looking for more space in the suburbs. And they might even, be freed up to do that more so because of, an expectation that we'll continue getting to work from home in large part among the workforce. So we have that to watch out for. That said, I've got to say, if you look at some of the data, there's people, when those people sell their downtown places, those are going pretty quick too. So it's there's, maybe people just want to swap places. I don't know. Closed sales, I'm not going to dwell on these. These are basically going to look just like those new pending sales numbers I showed you, except they're a month or two behind. So we saw the really bad drop in closed sales. It didn't hit us till April and May. And now we're finally starting to see the benefits of that recovery, such that we are only down 4% single family for closed sales through July, and almost 13% condos and townhouses. At this current trajectory, it's not unreasonable to think we're going to finish 2020 with more closed sales than we had last year. And there you go with the chart. If you break it down by county, this is year to date, so this isn't showing the recent rebound trends, but just looking overall how we've done this year compared to last year through July. You actually do see pockets of the state that are actually ahead already in terms of closed sales, particularly Santa Rosa County up here in the Western Panhandle, and Walton County, a couple of counties to the east of it, have had a strong year. So has St. Johns County up near Jacksonville, and Flagler below that. We're getting there, and there are parts of the state that are there already. I should note that I think one of the reasons why Walton County and St. Johns County are popping out is because those are very high median price areas. Lots of new construction and lots of very high-end luxury construction. And what we're seeing in the data, it's masked elsewhere in the state, but pretty much all across the state, $1 million single family homes and anything above that have been selling like hotcakes. There's problems with jumbo loans across the board, but that hasn't stopped a lot of people. As the stock market started to recover, this is the same thing that happened in the Great Recession. Employment didn't bounce back right away, but the stock market sure did, and that freed up a lot of wealthier people to start dipping into the housing market again, and they were the first people back in many ways. So that's happening again now, it seems. If we look at condos and townhouses, again, it's kind of a mixed bag. The size of these circles, by the way, represents how big the market was, so how many sales happened in that county. So So you can see here that a lot of our transactions for condos and townhouses are occurring in South Florida. Well, that's because about half the condos and townhouses in our state are in South Florida. So that's what that means. And then the color of the circle and the percentage I've reported there is the change from last year. So if you combine single family and condos, we have a few markets that are actually up for closed sales and a few that are down significantly but are making a comeback. I've got to say, again, the South Florida area was really hurt early on by that first wave. And so they've taken it on the chin a little bit harder than everybody else. But they have been roaring back. If you look at their new pending sales numbers as of late, they are looking really good. So they're going to be back. Just like everybody else is moving in that direction as well. That's the demand side of the market. Now looking on the supply side, some similar numbers. We didn't see a huge drop in new listings in March, even though that's when we started to see a lot of the drop in new pending sales. We did see a burst of withdrawn listings for listings that are already on the MLS. But the slowdown outside of South Florida, the slowdown in new listings didn't happen until the last week of March and then into the first 2 weeks of April when it really slowed down. But at the same point, mid-April, it started to recover. So it hasn't recovered to the extent that new pending sales have. So we don't have 20% growth in new listings year over year right now. We're actually kind of even with last year on the single family side. Although we have seen that kind of growth in terms of listings on the condos and townhouses side. So again, you can look at our chart here, and it's funny because it almost looks just like Irma did in 2017. We had one really bad month where we didn't have a lot of listings. Now we're getting the listings again, but not nearly enough to make up for the deficit we have. So if you saw me the last time I talked about it, this was my rationale behind what I thought was going to happen to home values, and that is that demand. If you ignore the supply side of the equation and you just think about consumer demand for anything, including houses, if demand falls, then that will reduce the number of sales simply because you're going to have less people interested in buying. And that's going to put downward pressure on prices because you've got fewer people bidding for the same amount of supply. We haven't changed supply at all. On the other side of the coin, let's say supply drops and the demand doesn't change. So by itself, falling supply means that we'll have fewer sales because there will be fewer homes on the market to buy. But it means upward pressure on prices because the few homes that are left are now scarce. And so for a set number of buyers, a set level of demand, they're competing for fewer items, right? So both of these things, falling demand and falling supply, have a negative effect on sales, but they have an ambiguous effect on sale prices. So the key was to pretty much determine, are demand and supply going to fall about the same amount in the initial wave, where we're all kind of reacting to the fact that this pandemic is actually happening. Oh my God. That was basically what we did all through March and some of us into April if we were still in denial. But as soon as we got through that and real estate was declared an essential service by the governor, and we started to figure out ways to get out and all of us to do our jobs to the best we could. There was demand there, and that demand, which had been temporarily on the fence, hopped back in. And it hopped back in, as I just showed you, a little bit faster than supply has. So that says to me, not only are prices not going to fall through the floor like they did ahead of the Great Recession, but they might even start going up. And that's exactly what's happening. So, and it's all being driven by this really rapid rate of demand. We've got our regular demand for this time of year. This time of year, we normally have, it's not our peak season, but we've got a lot of sales this time of year usually. So our regular demand for this year is there. It might be a little less than normal. It might not be. It's hard for me to parse what is regular demand right now, because we've also got a bunch of quote unquote pent up demand. All the demand from the spring buying season for all the people who wanted to get out there and look, who couldn't and had to wait until now. Well, now they're all in the market too. So there's two components, our regular summertime demand and then the pent-up demand from spring. And eventually we run out of that extra pent-up demand. So then we'll see where we stand in terms of the demand side of the market. If it's a little bit weak, then we might see a little bit of softening in prices. But what we're not going to see is prices falling through the floor like we did in the Great Recession. And that's because we have done the opposite in terms of building homes. We built way too many homes ahead of the last recession, and then ahead of this recession, we already were in a shortage. So we're not really in a situation where price can fall that much, because as soon as prices fall enough, we even have more and more buyers who are able to hop into the market who wanted to buy and will be able to afford a home. So I don't see that situation panning out, not this year at least. Again, July median sale price, look at that. Median sale price was up over 10% for both single family homes and condos and townhouses. So, a lot of these went under contract in May as we started to recover. So we're really seeing it, this really high rebound in terms of prices. That's led to a really high dollar volume of sales. We had almost $13 billion worth of sales on the single family side, and 3.2 billion for condos and townhouses across the state. And that was just July. And those are up, as you can see, significantly over last year. We're up such to the point that the amount of dollar volume in closed sales we've had for single family homes is in positive territory across the state. Even though sales are still down 4%, those price bumps allowed us to get over the line for dollar volume at the end of July. So I'm going to stop my outlook here so that I can get to SunStats, but that gives you a general sense of where we're at. And I think we continue on this route. I'm very concerned about inventory. I probably should just skip over to inventory. That's just showing you how this first triangle was oversupply in our market at the end of the last business cycle. And then here's the undersupply. So we were able to absorb all that oversupply, but now we've got a severe undersupply to deal with. And not only that, but that was new construction. But looking at existing homes, the interest rate is a double-edged sword. These really low rates that people have been locking into over the last 10 years were great to get them to make that transaction then, but it's also going to be harder to convince them to upgrade their house or do whatever now, because they're locked into really low rates. And so going forward out of this, current burst we're having, we're not going to be able to rely on interest rates as much to entice people out of their houses. So just something to keep in mind going forward. But inventory significantly down versus last year. In fact, in July, and I'm talking about single family, that's where the issue is. Single family's down almost 32% compared to where we were last year, inventory wise. Only down about 5% for condos and townhouses. So not nearly the issue over there, but definitely we're hurting on the single family home side for inventory. Places like the Tampa Metro are actually down over 40% year over year in inventory and are posting month supply readings of about 1.5 months supply, things like that are just crazy numbers that I never expected I would see. So that's a concern we have going forward. Inventory is the number one concern. That could eventually limit our ability, to have as many sales and could potentially push prices up a ridiculous amount, which would be great if we kept the same number of sales, but we're not going to do that if inventory really becomes a problem. Although on the bright side, if 30% of your inventory is missing, you still have 70% of it left. So there is stuff to sell out there, but let me stop there and bring you over to floridarealtors.org, which is clearly the website for Florida Realtors. But If you haven't been around lately, you'll notice that it has changed a lot. We had a multi-year project to revamp and revise the website, and this is the culmination of that effort. I'm gonna make it a little bigger so that you guys can see it more clearly, but if you're looking for the stuff that my team and I do, you'll find us under tools and research here at the top. We have actually a lot more tools and research than just my team. We've got Form Simplicity, MLS Advantage, all of that. But under research reports here on the right is where you're going to find a lot of our stuff out of my team. The first item that you'll find is market statistics. So since 2011, we've been creating, if you click here and you follow the link, eventually you'll see this page is under construction. We still haven't migrated to the new web page yet. So you can find our market research page here. And if you click that, you'll have to wait a while, but eventually this page will load and you can get all of our old reports. This is where you're going to find our reports that look like this. If you look at your local associations reports, if they're using ours, they may look like this. Or if you're going directly to our website, you can find them all there. We do these at the county level, state level, and metropolitan area level. This happens to be the latest report for Florida. And here's all of the metrics we use. So I'll just run through them because that'll be key for later. But closed sales, again, just the count of everything that closed in the month. Closed sales that were paid all in cash. So important to track cash sales because sometimes that's a proxy for investors. And also, right now we've actually got very low, cash sales compared to finance sales. Median sale price is when you take all the homes that sold in that area during that time period and you look for the middle price. So it's not the average where you'd add up all the prices and divide by the number of sales. It's just where you find the middle number. The key advantage to that is that medians are not skewed by outliers. If you have homes that are generally between the $200,000 and $300,000 range, but one weird house just sells for like $2 million at the same time, your average will be skewed upward by that. That will pull it up. But the median sale price, it doesn't matter what the top price is. We're still just looking at the middle price. That's why we tend to look at medians. But we also throw in average sale price. You'll see average is higher. Why is it higher than median? Because, again, you've got those upper end homes that can skew an average a little bit. So sometimes it's useful to compare those two numbers if you're looking to see how much luxury is skewing upwards the average. Dollar volume, again, we just count the values of all the homes that sold. Median percent of original list price received is a key stat to follow in times like this because it's a very powerful indicator of what's happening in the market. If suddenly we're comparing the sale price basically to the original list price, and if the distance between those two starts to change drastically, that's always a key sign that something is happening in the market. We also look at the median number of days that it takes for the typical listing to go from, and this is among anything that closed in the month. So among those homes that closed, how many days was there between the initial listing date and the date it went under contract for the final time went pending essentially for the final sale. And then again, comparing median time to sale is when we look at the distance between the actual closing and the listing date. So two different figures you can look at there to gauge how fast stuff is moving. New pending sales I've gone over, new listings I've gone over. Pending inventory is just the count of everything in pending status at the end of the month. Some people like to look at that number. I prefer to just look at the count of new pending sales. Inventory, again, the count of active listings at the end of the month, very key statistic. And then month supply of inventory, which again is our ever-present gauge of how the market's moving with how fast stuff is moving off the market. So again, in our reports, you're going to find charts like this with explanations and economists note in there for all of the different statistics we make available to you. That said, these are all PDF files, and we do thousands of these each month because we do every county and we do it by property type, and we do every metro area, and we do legislative districts every quarter and whatnot. And it's really cumbersome to put this on a website. So one of the things we wanted to do was to design a tool that would allow people to generate reports on the fly, right from the web. So that's what we've done with SunStats. SunStats, you can navigate there from the research page. It's under new interactive market reports. Or the simpler way is just to go to sunstats.floridarealtors.org. And when you do that, you'll be asked to log in. It's the same login and password you use to get into floridarealtors.org. And when you don't know your password or you haven't signed up for one yet, it's really easy to sign up for that. That you just need your NERDS ID or 2 or 3 other IDs that are optional just to prove that you're a member. And you can get in. So this is what SunStats brings you to when you first log in. This is our dashboard. And I have it defaulted to single family homes for Florida, but you can actually change the area it defaults to. You can select your own area that is important to you. And it just runs through all the statistics I was just showing you. It provides the latest month's number, the same month last year, and the percent change year over year. And then it gives you a little sparkline chart of how that number has trended over the last 12 months. So just a really useful little dashboard. We're actually working on adding a couple buttons here that will allow you to just export the data or export a one-page PDF of the dashboard. You can click on any of these question marks also to determine, to get a little bit of a refresh on what each of those metrics do. So let's say I want to change it. Well, I can change it. What we've loaded into SunStats is not only every county, every metro area, and the state level stats, but we've also loaded in municipal, city level stats, and zip code level stats. So I can type in any city I want. Let's say I want to do Key West. Then I have the option of either picking the Key West zip code or the municipal boundaries for Key West. So there we go. I get Key West, and I want to see townhouses and condos. All I got to do is apply that, and now my dashboard is showing that. That will temporarily change it, but I can go into settings here, and I'll show you that later, to permanently change what my default dashboard thing is. So that's the dashboard. The chart builder, which isn't for everybody, but if you're really a data nerd like me, you love this tool. This allows you to create custom charts. So rather than having me and my team pick what charts go into your reports or that you show other people, you can actually create your own. And we give you lots of options over here on the left. Again, any of those geographic areas you like, you can pick. So I'm going to go with the Orlando, Sanford metro area. I want to see active inventory. And I want to look at all property types. I'm going to look at monthly data, but I want to go back to 2009. Heck, let's go all the way back to 2008. And I'm going to take a look at that. And here it is. Here's our, straight from our database for the Orlando metro area. That, and you can see over here on the map that encompasses the 4-county area around Orlando. This is what inventory was going back to 2008. So a really useful tool. I can download this as an image. So there you go. Or I can download it with branding. So it's got my picture and my contact info loaded in already. I'm going to show you how that works in a minute, but that's essentially your face here and your name here. And we know branding is really important to all of you. So we wanted to make sure that this product had that kind of functionality. So you can get those images and then you can just post those images to social media if you want, or you can throw them into a newsletter or any kind of use you see fit. We've also got, whenever we create a chart, it gives a table down here. It gives the actual values and the change year over year. And we only let it go back about 13 months on the screen here, but when you download it, you're going to get everything in the date range you selected for the chart. So this is the first time we're doing this, where we're actually giving you guys access directly to exported data from our database. We've always been hiding everything in PDFs and making it hard to scrape. But then we figured out all the big firms can afford to hire temps to scrape our data. So, let's just level the playing field and make sure it's fair for everybody. So we're letting you all export our data now. So here you go. Here's inventory every month for Florida, going all the way back to starting in 2008, going up to 2020. That I know will excite many of you. So there's also lots of other functions. There's you can display the chart as year over year change instead of the absolute value for the statistics. So you can see inventory was really falling because it's below zero here on the left side, and then it shot back up, and then it's lately not been doing so well, although we did have that bump in inventory in late 2018 to look at. So you can look at those. Those are sometimes useful to look at. You can decide if you want to include zero on the vertical axis. I think it's better to look at median sale price for that, to show you what I mean. But I guess actually it's still showing zero on the vertical axis here. I know it'll work. If we look at the percent of original list price received. So if I'm looking at this percent of original list price received, you can see how since in 2008, when you couldn't give away a home, people were paying much less than the original listing price when the transaction completed. And you go left to right, and now we're getting close to people. The typical sale is 98% or so of the original listing price, because the market is so hot right now. Now, if I wanted, I could make sure I could force the number zero to be on the axis. What that means is, if I wanted to see in perspective from zero all the way up to whatever number I'm looking at, then I can force zero to be on the axis. It's not useful for this statistic, but there are other statistics where sometimes it's important to actually have zero down there. So just for context reasons. But I'll deselect that and go to advanced options. We have 10 price tiers, which I haven't quite figured out what to do with these guys, because we came up with these price tiers in 2011 such that each of these price tiers had roughly the same number of homes in it. Now, you can't tell me that there's that many $0 to $49,000 homes out there right now. So, but for consistency reasons for the data set, we've had to keep these. So if you're wondering about where the homes that cost between $0 and $50,000 are, there aren't many left. But we're going to try to figure out a solution that doesn't involve too much math to this, but like looking at percentiles, but that's confusing. I think people like these price tiers. So we've just decided that at some point we're going to add a bunch of luxury price tiers to what we already have. But for now, we're stuck with these 10 categories. But so I can look at homes. I can look at the inventory of homes at $1 million and up in Orlando. So there that is. It's kind of volatile because there's not a lot of those homes out there. Oh, let me make sure I I'm looking at the right stat. I was not looking at inventory. There we go. So this is $1 million plus. So I can look at different price tiers. I can look at traditional versus foreclosure versus short sale types. Although obviously the ability to select this hasn't been relevant for a few years because we've had so few distressed sales. And I am really hoping we're not going to have a lot of distressed sales coming up. If we do, it's going to be probably not till next year because of all the forbearance rulings. But for those are there if you need them. And then finally, my favorite part is where you can pick one of these categories, either geography or the metric or the property type, and you can throw more than one thing on the graph. So I'm going to go geographic area. I want to see Orlando versus the Tampa Bay metro in terms of inventory. And this is pretty interesting. So we've got Orlando here on the bottom and Tampa on the top. Tampa's probably a third bigger than Orlando in terms of the metro area population. So that makes sense, maybe a quarter to a third bigger. So that makes sense as to why Tampa has more inventory. But look at what's happened in the Tampa Bay inventory here at the end. I'll refine this to just look at the last couple of years. I don't think I actually clicked on it. There, you gotta click on it. Just look at how much Tampa Bay's inventory has declined over the last couple of months. So you can do interesting comparisons between two counties, two cities, two zip codes that are similar and or different. I could just put in two Orlando area zip codes here, Windermere and its neighbor in Winter Garden. And you'll see the inventory levels there. It might be interesting to look at median sale price for those two. You can do up to 4 areas at the same time. So here's median sale price over the last 3 or 4 years for these two areas, and it shows them on the map right there. I could also remove Winter Garden and look at Orange County, so I can kind of get a sense of how does this particular zip code compare to the county overall. So sometimes you want to do different types of geography, or sometimes you want to do the same type, but different. Oops, wrong button. Should apply that. So there you can see Windermere, the 34786 zip code tends to be above, quite well above what the average or median for Orange County is. 34786, of course, is famous for being the zip code where Tiger Woods crashed his car and got attacked by his wife with a golf club. So I've got about 9 or 10 minutes left. That's really the extent of what we've built so far. Now I showed you those reports that we still have, those PDF reports. We still produce them. The long-term goal of SunStats, and we're still working on developing it, although we're doing so much related to the coronavirus and the economy right now that it's slowed us down a little bit. But what our main goal is to reach a point where we actually have a report builder in here that would be the next thing over from the chart builder, where you'll be able to kind of customize a report that you will get emailed to you every month automatically that focuses on your area. And that report will look much like our current PDF report. So that's still in the works for the future, but I should mention that because that ultimately was why we built SunStats, was to be able to do that. And we're getting there, but we put these two tools in first because they were lower hanging fruit and we thought people would get a lot of use out of them. So that said, I'm happy to take, if you guys want to have me field questions or anything, we've got about, 8 minutes left here.
We do have a couple questions that came in. One wanted to confirm, when does the stats get updated every month? Was that the 10th of the month?
Good question. So because the statistics we release are used by the media and are kind of the definitive thing that keep the realtor brand in the news from month to month, we have to be really careful that they're accurate. And in order to do that, we often have to wait a while before we calculate them. In fact, we don't calculate our stats until the night of the 15th day after the end of a month. So we're in August right now. Our August stats won't actually run until September 15th overnight. The reason why we have to do that is because MLSs are funny things, and lots of things kind of change in them well after they've happened. For instance, there are certain parts of the state where a closing might happen, but the MLS doesn't see it until 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 days later. So we have to wait for all of that stuff to get settled in the MLS before we can really calculate the stats. If we don't wait for that, and we were to compare, let's say, this month's numbers to last year's numbers, then we've got a problem because all the data are in for last year, whereas they might not be for this year. So we might inadvertently underestimate what the change in sales was. That's something that always worries me about some of the built-in functions you guys have in your MLSs. I have not used them, but I just worry if they're able to give you an analysis of, how many sales were there this month versus the same month last year. Well, all the data aren't in for this month yet. So it might be actually telling you the market's doing worse than it really is. So it's a trade-off, right? Because we got to wait a while. Not only do they not run till the 15th, but we don't even release them until probably the week after that. So usually in the low 20s in terms of the date. We actually follow when NAR releases their statistics every month for the national level. That way journalists have the ability to write an article that talks about, well, here's how the national market's doing, here's how the state market's doing. And we encourage the local associations around Florida, and many of you do, to release on that date as well.
Okay, great. There was another question here, and then Amy Snook has a couple of questions for you, so we'll just finish these real quick. One viewer is asking, what do you predict the housing market to be next year at this time? And when do you see the aftermath of the pandemic to occur for job losses to start affecting our market?
Well, unfortunately, it seems like that might be happening sooner than later, just because we ended up not having Congress extend any of the unemployment benefits from the federal level because they had to compromise on something, and they didn't get that done. Both sides are making a decent argument as to why the Democrats say we should continue the $600 of supplemental income, and the Republicans say we should reduce that. And both of the parties were very much in line at the beginning of this whole thing, because we were trying very much to put the economy into suspended animation, or some other term like that, so that we could figure out what's going on, hopefully get something in place that'll help us mitigate it. And beat the virus down quickly. So none of the parties had a problem with spending a lot of money then. Turns out we were unsuccessful in containing the virus. So now that it's endemic to the US, now that's where you're starting to see them have differences, because this is going to be a longer term issue. We can't keep printing money like this forever. That's how we're paying for all this. We're printing money. That can eventually cause inflation and problems. So that said, I would have liked us to not just drop everybody off this supplementary income cold turkey. Would have liked to ease them off of it, because this is a pretty big economic shock to a lot of people. I don't have great data on it yet because it's hard to track. About 3/4 of unemployment benefits in the US are given out on these prepaid debit cards that don't show up in spending data that I've been looking at. So I can see what everyone who's not on unemployment is doing, and they're holding steady in their level of consumption of goods in the economy. But the one data set I've seen that includes these prepaid cards, it's going down. The vast majority of those affected by these job losses so far have been renters. And so that's, if we start to see problems, that's really where it's going to start. And that's just going to exacerbate this whole problem we have right now where landlords were overlooked when we did all this stimulus. And so now renters don't have to pay rent and there's no recompense for landlords. That said, if getting rid of the eviction moratorium is the only thing we do, then we're going to have a lot of homeless people pretty quick. So we've got to figure out a way to solve this problem, and I really hope Congress tries to do that. They're the only one with enough purse strings to make something like that happen.
And then one last question, and then Amy's going to take it over. Somebody else wanted to know if you could do bar charts, like different types of charts versus lines, or is it only that line type of chart?
So our running joke, I'll share some of our lingo in our department, is called version 2. Whenever we have a good idea, someone says version 2 and we write it down and we file it away because at this point, version 2 is going to be the best thing we've ever seen because it's really got a long list on it. But yes, I would like to see different charts on there, bar charts, comparison charts, where you can compare year over year. Some of those charts I showed you earlier where I have all the months lined up for 4 different years worth of data, would like to maybe be able to implement that too. We kind of wanted to ease everybody in though early on. If we had put everything in we wanted to put in all at once, it would probably be a really confusing tool to use. So we're trying to keep it a little simple as people get experienced with it. And hopefully enough people pick it up that we can actually get professionals to do some educational and training videos with us on it, allocate resources to that. We do plan to actually do some walkthrough videos at some point and maybe look at different scenarios. Hey, my client wants to know this. How would I show that on a graph and what should I do? We're going to start trying to put those together at some point. If I can ever find time not to be on a Zoom talking to people about the pandemic. So I'm really refreshed that you actually asked me to come in and talk about SunStats some today too. So that brightened my day.
Thank you. Those were all the questions. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Rebecca. I do have one follow-up question before we conclude. You were, first of all, I'm so excited about the reports being sent proactively to us once we save one. That's fabulous, since I have a calendar reminder on the 22nd of every month to go pull the market stats. But one question I had, it's really interesting. We see when properties are priced right, they are flying off the shelf. But I don't see it, and I don't know if this is the same across the whole state, in 55 and over communities, moving as fast as some of the other properties. And I was curious to some of the data, and I know you talked about millennials, but are we seeing any data from this, is age bracket the right word, about 55 and overs across the state?
I haven't specifically seen that because there's not any clearly obvious data point for me to look at for that. So this is actually one of the reasons why I love these things, is because I learn more from you usually than you do from me. So that's something I'm actually going to go check out, and I'll get back to you.
Well, I didn't mean to create a homework assignment for you, but
it's not homework. I love what I do.
And you're very good.
It's fun. So
well,
it's an honor to be able to do this for all of you and get you data that you need, and I'm lucky to be with Florida Realtors. So
that's wonderful. I
get all teary-eyed here.
Well, I want to thank you so much for taking your time for the Women's Council once again. And I will say this to our team, to our members, part of why we're part of this organization and separate ourselves from so many others in the industry is our knowledge, our expertise, and separating ourselves when we're with clients and other realtors as we lead in the industry. So this is really important. And for those of you who are a little bit scared of technology and reports, I'm here to tell you, whether you're using the traditional reporting or SunStats, they are really good information and not difficult to use. But if you need help in how to analyze reports and how to use it, maybe we'll bring Dr. O'Connor back and talk about a rudimentary way to analyze the reports monthly. So if there aren't any other questions, I will tell you all that Heather Hurry from Pillar to Post was not able to join us today, but she sends her regards. And again, we sincerely appreciate Pillar to Post support. But Dr. O'Connor, on behalf of everyone from the Women's Council Florida State Network, we want to thank you for your time today, and as always, your wisdom and expertise.
My pleasure. It was great to see all of you again.
Thanks.
Thank
All right. Thanks for a great
Take
session.
care. I know I'm keeping you from selling houses, so get out there.
Well, you might be keeping us from happy hour as well, but that's okay. Who's counting? All right. Thank you, everyone. Wish everyone a great rest of your day, and we'll see everyone else back tomorrow for the last day of convention, in particular at Governing Board. Dr. O'Connor, once again, thank you.
Take care. Thanks so much.
Take care,
And
everyone.
networking room at 4,
Oh,
at 5.
networking. Yep.
5. Networking room at 5. Bye, guys.
All right. Bye, guys. Thanks.